Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 4, Episode 4 of the Senstennial Podcast, a member of the Hockey Podcast Network. I don't know about everyone listening or watching this week's episode, but I'm super pumped for the regular season to get underway. It's coming up Thursday night. We have Ottawa taking on the Buffalo Sabres for the season opener. So we're going to discuss a number of topics to get you primed for puck drop. And we're going to start off with Derick Brassard. He goes from being on a PTO with the Ottawa Senators to signing a one-year $750K deal. So he's here for a year. Other Matt, I'll flip it to you. What do you think about that signing?
I have like mixed feelings about it. I think it's cool that he's back. He was a pretty integral part of the 2017 run to the Eastern Conference Final, but I didn't see it in preseason. I understand he was on that power play that was getting all of the goals, but I feel like if you put Mark Kastelik in the same spot, it probably could have had the same effect. I like it in the sense that he's a solid like fourth line option, 13 forward sort of deal. The first couple of games that I saw him in preseason, he was extremely underwhelming, and I even forgot he was on a PTO. I think he has the upside to be a solid depth addition, and there's nothing more than that. I just like, yeah, it's a signing. He's solid.
I'll ask Bennett in a second. I was just going to say, though, I think they bring different skill sets to the table between Brassard and Kastelik. For me, Kastelik is more of that heavy hitter. He's a guy you bring in when you're playing against those teams who I think have maybe like a bigger lineup or maybe some more tough, gritty guys at the bottom end of their lineup. Whereas Brassard, I think, is a guy who, especially in the case of injuries, to me, he can step up and be a piece in the power play and really help you out there. And like you said, we saw that in the preseason. I'd say for the beginning of preseason, a lot of guys are shaking off rust. That Tkachuk Norris Batherson line looked kind of rough to start preseason, and they just gradually got better. So I'm not too worried about that. I don't think he'll really stop a prospect from coming in. It seems like he's had a chat with DJ Smith and he understands his role, is what he said, which to me means that he knows he'll be in the press box some nights, and he's just accepted that fact at this stage in his career. But yeah, Bennett, I'll let you weigh in and get your thoughts on that.
I think it's a good deal to bring him in on, 1 year. I don't know if it's technically league min, but it's like essentially league min.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, to have like a veteran presence there in the bottom six. We're putting a lot of pressure, I would say, on a guy like Pinto in the third line to be that center driving play in the third line. I think if we'd had like another like rookie or kind of untested person on the fourth line, then we're sort of asking for a lot of our centers across the board. So having somebody who has that experience is good. Like you said, Matt, I think he looked good in the power play. I think like we know that that's been something that he's been able to do throughout his career. And he had success in the power play here in Ottawa during his previous stint. And I think that if we're wondering about what other forwards could help round out that second power play unit, now that we have the possibility of two legitimate threats on the power play, I think he makes a lot more sense to put in that spot than Kastelik. And so that gives a little bit more flexibility if you want to move somebody like, say, Giroux down to that second power play unit, maybe even Batherson, however you want to play it. Then, you have three talented forwards that can help bolster that unit. And then if you throw in a guy like, Sanderson or Brandstrom perhaps to help quarterback that, then you have a more rounded threat on the power play, which is turning into something of a strength for this team, which for so many years it's been a huge Achilles heel. So that's really cool to see.
Oh my God, it's so important. I think having two solid power plays is like what every successful team needs.
Yeah.
We've seen it how many years in a row. We put out our first power play, they're buzzing, then they got to get off the ice because they're tired, and we lose all puck possession. It's all this dump and go get it and do it again, and this whole thing. Whereas our second power play dominated the preseason. DJ was saying our power play was the best thing about our team the entire preseason, and it showed. Like it was incredible. And I think a lot has to do with the three names of Giroux, Pinto, and DeBrincat. But yeah, I think I wouldn't put Mark Kastelik where Derick Brassard is. Just to be clear, I would have somebody else there. I would probably have Tyler Mott if somebody was injured. But with that said, like Brassard fit in there really well. His body is aging, but his hockey IQ doesn't. And in his heyday, in his prime, he was a heck of a player offensively. He was always good for 55 to 60 points. And in his time in Ottawa, he was a good offensive threat. And I think he's going to be a good option for us at the fourth line center role. But as I said, I would like to roll in other guys. Like I think Kastelik has shown he deserves to be in the NHL. And if that offsets Austin Watson on that right wing side and Kastelik doesn't need to play a center position, I'm happy with that too, because we saw Austin Watson lose a fight to Arbor Jackeye. I think I said his name right.
Yeah.
Don't like that fella, but he plays a hard-nosed game.
Hard-nosed game. There you go. Matt, you mentioned that the power play is one of the standouts of the preseason. What have been some of the other standouts of the preseason? I think you touched on one of them already, which to me is Shane Pinto. I mean, he has 8 points in 6 games. He's looked really strong. He's been utilized at all positions. And I think that DJ is walking the walk. He talked up Pinto all preseason long. He said how much of a miss it was to not have him on the team last year. And him and Dorian have both said that in interviews as part of the preseason tour. And I think he's had a really strong preseason showing so far, and is looking to take a big step this year. What do you think?
I mean, there are 2 Matts on this podcast, and I know it was talked, but
that was directed at you. Yeah.
Shane Pinto was one of our best players, period. Mm-hmm. He's a player that every like old style hockey fan loves, and he's a player that every new style hockey fan would also love. He plays the game you want a hockey player to play. And good God, was he good all preseason. And yes, it's preseason. It's, overanalyzing that is stupid to do. But he was playing against legit NHL competition most nights.
Well, okay, sorry, let me moderate that. We played the Habs like 4 times. I don't think they count as legit NHL competition.
Okay,
let's be clear about this.
I would say they have pieces that are legit NHL competition.
They are a team that, technically speaking, play in the NHL.
I know we were talking about the Pinto, but good God, they are in for a rough season. My goodness gracious.
Imagine if the NHL had relegation. How badly that would have gone down.
Yeah, but we would have been relegated years ago. Colorado would have been relegated. Arizona would have been out of the league by now.
But just to add,
we'd be playing in like beer league if like relegation was a thing.
Oh my gosh!
Whoa! Hey, come on! No, to go back on Shane Pinto though, I definitely agree with Matt. And honestly, I don't care if I take some flack from this. He kind of looks like the player that I want Josh Norris to be at 5-on-5. He is responsible both in the defensive end, through the neutral zone. He gets it done on the power play, which Josh Norris is exceptional at, so not knocking him there. But I think the biggest thing for me is like Shane Pinto has more of a 5-on-5 game than Josh Norris. At least, judging by preseason, which is not the best sample size. We'll see how things get going when the season gets underway. But to me, if Shane Pinto can stay that player, I think the Sens might luck out in a contract just because that he is going to be playing on Ottawa's third line. And him, Tyler Mott, and Matthew Joseph, they had excellent, and I mean excellent chemistry together. They were so much fun to watch. They were definitely the best line at 5-on-5 in preseason, just hands down. And if they play as well as they did in the regular season as they did in the preseason, man, the Sens are going to have a lethal top nine because I know that Kachuk, Norris, and Batherson are not going to be slow or cold the entire season. And DeBrincat and Giroux, just by judging that power play, if they can get some chemistry going with Tim Stützle, that line is just going to be, I think, potentially one of the best in the NHL, at least for point production. So I think that definitely, as a whole, the roster is exciting. But to see just how good that third line is or was chemistry wise in the preseason was huge. And it makes you forget about a certain left wing who was slated to be on the third line.
I was literally just about to be like, do you guys think Alex Fermenta will see him at all this season?
Honestly, and I've heard chatter that, potentially the investigation will come to a conclusion in late October, but who knows, right? These things can last a long time. In our opinion, I'm pretty sure I can speak for all of us. If any player on the Sens ever had something like that come out and they were guilty of it, we would want them off the team, and we want to just make sure people know that we don't think or take any of those accusations lightly at all. And I just wanted to make that clear. But from a business perspective, I just think that if the Senators were to use him in a trade, that might be a way that they could market him to another team.
Yep. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I would like, if a player was on my team that did that, like, look at what just happened with Ian Cole. And I think the difference here between Ian Cole and then members of that Team Canada team is that, he was named specifically, whereas with that Team Canada team, there was 23 other people. There has to be a bit of a due process. Would I have been upset if they were suspended? No, I wouldn't. Like, if every player that played in the NHL that was on that team had been suspended, I wouldn't care. And I think that's the most important thing, aside from hockey and everything, is that, the victim is able to find peace and justice is able to be had. So aside from Alex Formenton and whatever is happening there, I still think we have probably one of the best forward cores in the NHL right now.
On paper, anyway.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, like you need to see that it happens, but just looking at the names and the ability that they have and what they did last season, and then what you saw from some guys in the preseason, like, our fourth line is obviously going to be our weakest point, but having a damn good top nine, like that, I would put up against just about anybody, quality / quantity wise. What do you think, Bennett?
Well, listen, this is a deep cut. Real fans of the Senstennial Podcast will recall last year in my bold preseason prediction, I predicted that Shane Pinto would leapfrog Norris as the team's number one center. Obviously, a couple of developments in the season made so that wasn't the case. Obviously, Pinto being injured, as well as Stützle being moved to center, and then creating that extra player vying for those spots. That being said, we've talked about how good Pinto has looked and how good he's looked at 5-on-5, which was specifically Norris's weakness last year. I think there's very much like an argument that can be made that we have almost like a 1A, 1B, 1C situation going on here with our center depth right now, which is a good position to be in. And to pivot to just like the forward depth in general, I mean, like, only last year, like, especially after like a couple of injuries and COVID and stuff, we were sitting here saying that our paper thin forward depth was absolutely killing us. And it was like when Norris missed like 2-3 weeks or something, we literally didn't score any goals. Like we didn't score anything in the power play. We weren't generating any kind of offense, like a 5-on-5 really. Like all it took was missing one or two players, and we lost the ability to drive offense at all. And now I'm not as worried about that prospect because we have,
Yeah.
three legitimate like lines that can generate offense.
And remember, like, the absolute, um, disdain that everybody had because DJ just was refusing to try Stutzla on the wing or at center. And you had like bums playing up the middle on the second line.
Yeah.
And we're just like, for God's sake, just play him at center. Just try it. I don't want to see Chris Tierney playing with this 19-year-old superstar child.
Yeah.
Just do the right thing, you big old bastard. Yeah. And thank God DJ did. But I mean, like, it can't be stated enough. And I feel like this might be like the Shane Pinto show because he's incredible. He could end up being one of the steals of the draft for the Sens, but in general, like, he's incredible. You saw what he was able to do on the power play at UND and then for the States at the World Juniors. Like, he's so good. And this year, I knock on wood, he stays healthy because our top nine is nasty. It's really, really good. But then, we got our defense, and then that's where the question marks come in. So, I mean, Matt, do you think they make a move for a defenseman sooner rather than later that maybe name rhymes with Blakeup, explicit this Dickrin? I don't know.
Oh God. Well, I was gonna finish answering Bennett's thing about talking about defense and how good Brandstrom and Sanderson looked in preseason. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about it, I think, a couple weeks in a row now, so I won't touch on it for too much longer, really. But yeah, Jacob Chychrun, like, I honestly think that he would be a good upgrade. His contract is really nice. It seems like he'd waive his no trade clause to come to Ottawa, got ties to the area. Injuries, not the best, obviously, but I think he's playing top line or was playing top line minutes in Arizona. You're more prone to injury the more minutes you play. Essentially, in my opinion, like, I basically think that Chychrun's really going to help your roster out. If him and Jake Sanderson play with one another, that would be huge. But I mean, one of them would have to take right side as a left-handed shot, so we'd have to see where that went. But
hear me out on this.
Sure.
If you're playing Jacob Chychrun, you get him. Why not try Sanderson on that right side?
I mean, yeah, and that's totally a possibility, and I'm open to that. It depends on first what DJ Smith wants. It seems like regardless, he would want a player of Chychrun's caliber on the roster.
Yeah.
But again, I think that it's also Ottawa's not really under the gun to make a move. I think that they have time to see how October goes and then reassess after October. And I think that's really how they should be taking things. You don't need to jump the gun, give up a top prospect and a first and potentially other pieces to get a player. Let's just ride the roster as it is now, reassess the end of October, and come back to it.
Sens fans, it's finally time to hit the ice again, and thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you're in for the season of a lifetime. New customers can bet $5 on any team and get $200 in free bets if they win. Personally, I'm probably slamming Shane Pinto at plus 3,500 for the Calder odds, but that's just me. If that wasn't enough excitement, you can turn small bets into bigger payouts with same-game parlays. Combine multiple bets like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more for your shot at an even bigger payout. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your money whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Bet $5 on any NHL team to win their game and get $200 in free bets if they do. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL.
And going back to Jake Sanderson playing that right side, like he is looking to be an elite caliber defenseman. And if you look at the NHL, 20 years ago, handedness didn't really matter. If you were the best player, you were going to play whatever and wherever they needed you to. And Jake Sanderson has played the right side. He's succeeded there. Why not give him the opportunity? Like, how cool would it be seeing this kid succeed on the right side on his left side? He's got a Norris ballot type player, and just how good our defense could look, giving him that opportunity, shaking things up a little bit, because I think genuinely he could do it.
Yeah, definitely. And Brandstrom having some experience on the right side, he could potentially slot in beside Jake Sanderson. He had some excellent showings in preseason where he was just great at transitioning the puck. Still was a bit lackluster on points, to be honest, but he looked really good handling the puck. And I think the points will come if he can continue to play like that. It just depends on whether he can remain at that level or if that was just, I don't know, like a small spurt. So remains to be seen, but hopefully that was a good recap of the top showings from preseason. I don't know if you guys really had any hot takes or bold predictions for any lineup changes. I mean, I was under the impression that generally the top three lines are kind of set in stone, and the only movement is going to be honestly, like maybe the fourth. Well, yeah, likely the fourth line. And then on defense, like maybe the 5-6, and then, shuffling of the 4 slot. But it seems like the top end of the lineup is essentially set. And I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I'll let either of you chime in and let me know what you think.
I think that the personnel who round out the top 6 is absolutely set in stone. That being said, I would not preclude the possibility of there being some movement within that. Like just this morning, for instance, Sylvain Saint Laurent tweeting that the lines at practice were to Chuck Stutzler, Batherson, DeBrincat, Norris, Giroux, which is interesting. I didn't really get the chance to see many of the preseason games, but I saw a couple highlights of Giroux and DeBrincat finding some magic together. And you were mentioning that the Tkachuk Norris Batherson line was off to a slow start, so maybe shuffling Stützle and Norris here, they're trying to kickstart that. I don't know if that's how the team will line up on Thursday or not, but I think that there could definitely be some movement within that, and I think that there's only a couple of combinations of pairs of players that you would absolutely think need to stick together.
I think they were using the Stützle, Batherson, Tkachuk line in the Eastern games, and I believe that's the game that Stützle had 3 points and Tkachuk had 3 points, or they clearly have the chemistry together. And listen, I wouldn't be opposed at all to having the centers flip, and even if it means either one of Norris or Stützle goes down to the third line just to try it. I would be a little more hesitant sending Stützle down there. I would expect it would probably be Norris, but you're absolutely right. I think the parts of the top 6 and then the top 4 probably won't change. And I don't think, I love the idea of Sanderson and Brandstrom playing together. It would be a very interesting combination, but I don't think DJ will ever trust Brandstrom more than a third pairing role. Unless, there's injuries out the wazoo, or he takes a crazy elite step, which I'm genuinely hoping for. I would love to see the guy do so well that Jacob Chikrin becomes a figment of everybody's imagination, because Brandstrom became Small King, and then your bottom pairing becomes Travis Hamonic and Nick Holden. That's that's a heck of a bottom
Respectable.
pairing.
Yeah, respectable.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. The double H pairing. That's all you need. And to me, it's all about trying different things, and doing a move just to do a move probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think we can probably all agree that maybe the first thing that Dorion should have did was go and get that top 4 right-handed defenseman. And I mean, you got to do what you got to do when things come up, but I feel like the asking price for John Marino, who was always sort of connected to Ottawa but loosely, and that would have been a good fit. But
for me, so I think John Marino was interesting because he didn't go for much. But I remember Bruce Garriock saying that he didn't think that the term aligned with what the team wanted. Because remember, he has 5 years left on that contract, and he had a bit of a down year this past season, according to some analysts. So to me, it's like, does Ottawa take essentially another Zaitsev gamble where you're banking on a guy with long term to come in and be a player? Like Zaitsev in his first season with Ottawa was actually not too bad. He had a decent season, and then it was, downhill after that. So I think it's just one of those riskier moves where it's like, do you want a guy with that much term? Especially, I think he's being paid like 4.6 million, something around that. So for a guy who doesn't register a lot of points, it's a bit risky. But anyway, if there's a top 4 defenseman who plays right side out there, it'd be great. I think, like you said, Jay Smith, it really depends on him and what he feels comfortable lining up the roster like. And that kind of brings us to our next point. I don't really want to get into any negatives because this summer has been filled with a lot of really great moves, a lot of great re-signings for this team. And
all
it's
vibes.
Just, like the vibes have been like almost perfect. So, but I want to get your guys' takes on this, and I'll start with Bennett. Going into the season, obviously the roster has improved tenfold, really. Thanks to kicking off that summer with that good old trade for Alex Brinkat. But does this put DJ Smith on a bit of a hot seat going into the season? That's my question, because I feel like the expectations from the fan base and management is a lot higher. And so, like I said, Bennett, I'll let you start. What do you think about DJ Smith's position, and how much leash do you think he gets?
I think it absolutely places more pressure on him. The last couple of seasons that he's been our coach have been sort of free hits as far as most Sens fans and the organization have been concerned. A couple of years we were arguably tanking. A couple of years we were very clearly still rebuilding. Expectations were very low. And the biggest thing that's killed us in the last few seasons has been starting in a hole. I mean, the last 2 years in particular, the shortened COVID season and the more or less normal season that we had last year, barring, the month of November where we got ravaged by COVID. In both situations, we found ourselves basically out of it by the end of November due to the miserable start that we get. And then you just end up chasing the schedule all season long. And this is something that DJ is fully aware of and has been candid about in interviews this preseason. He's saying that they know that they need to start better than they have. There's no more excuses anymore. They have more talent than they've had since he's been here as a coach. And so there's going to be much higher expectations. I think players know that and prefer that. No player wants to walk into a season knowing and expecting to be a bottom feeder. Every single player in the league wants to be on a competitive team, and they want to help make their team competitive if they can. So I think that DJ still has some leash because this will be the first season where he's really expected to do something. And so I think that he can and that he should get some time, at least half a season, to see what he can do with some talent available to him. However, if we faceplant right out the gate again, I think that could spell the end of his time here, which I think would be a shame because I think he is a good coach. But he's really going to need to help get this team off to at least a respectable start, at least somewhere around 500. I mean, like in the last couple of seasons, we've been staring down records of like 2-10 or something after the first 12 games of the season, and that's obviously just like not going to cut it this year.
Absolutely. And if we're at 2-10 and 3, I think DJ's gone. That's completely unacceptable. It means he's not good enough at his job to work with the parts that he was given, that everybody's been asking for.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been hard on DJ, and I've also been hard on Dorion. Dorion has now shown that he can cut the mustard at what he's doing with some solid deals, some solid trades, some solid signings. I think at the 15 game mark, if it's below 500, and I'm not saying like, we're 7-8, I mean, if we have only won 5 games or something to that effect, things got to be shaken up early, and you have to have a strong start. I agree he should have a bit of a longer leash because of the situation that he has had for the last 3 seasons. But now he's got all-stars on this team. He's got some incredible talent, and he needs to be able to figure out and get the most out of his players. Sure, I mean, if everybody gets hurt, then that's understandable. But if everybody's healthy and we're losing a lot of games early, I don't see him staying that long.
The only thing I'll really say on this is I think the players really love DJ. And so I think that factors into it. And Brady Tkachuk, it seems like he has all the time in the world for DJ Smith. Yeah. But I also agree with you guys. I think if this season starts off and the Sens aren't at 500 through the first 15 games, and if they have a god-awful record, 5-10 or something to that effect, less than 5 wins, I think that Dorion has to call that shot. If it means bringing Shabbat, Giroux, and Tkachuk into his office and being like, either all together, one at a time, and being like, hey, what do you think if we made this change? Like, what would it mean for you? What would it mean for the locker room? And get the leaders of the team to come in and tell him what they think the issue is, and then he makes that call. I think that's fair. I think if he just makes this decision on his own, unilaterally, doesn't consult Tkachuk or the other leaders in the locker room, I think that could backfire. However, I think it does need to happen within the first month and a half of the season if it gets off to an awful start, because you just can't have it. And if you bring in a change early enough, there's time to get things back on the rails and have the team, headed towards the playoffs again. And we saw that with the St. Louis Blues. I mean, it was a bit of a different circumstance where Binnington came in and really saved their season, and they went from last to winning the Stanley Cup in 2019. So it can happen. It is extremely unlikely, but that's why I'm saying if you give yourself more runway, then that makes all the difference in the world. So, I mean, I really hope that DJ Smith does well. He has a good roster this year. He doesn't have any excuses, really. You could argue the blue line could be a bit better, but that's really it, I think. So you got to make do with what you have. I think Dorion's done his part, and now DJ has to do his.
One thing that I was thinking of, and before we wrap up here, is there were some interesting names on the waiver wire, and I don't know if you guys saw any of them, but a couple notable ones being Mike Riley, who was signed for 3 years in Boston, and Joey Decord from Seattle. I don't know about you guys, but when I saw Joey's name, I was considering, dropping Magnus Hellberg, the drip legend, to bring in Joey, because I think that would be really cool. And I think he still has a lot of upside, whereas I just don't see it with Magnus. But
for me,
your thoughts before we wrap up here.
Yeah, and I'll bet if you want a thought on it, I'll jump to you quickly. All I was going to say is Hellberg may not have the NHL pedigree, but he was lights out in the KHL. And I actually do have more faith in him playing better than Joey Daccord would, even though Joey Daccord has sweet vibes and seems like a hell of a kid. I just think that it was the choice that made sense. And I think you don't want to get into the whole nostalgia factor. And some people will argue that Brassard is that, but that's a whole different conversation. I think that Joey Daccord he had spurts in Ottawa where he played well, but he just wasn't good enough. And he hasn't played well enough for Seattle, and they have two other capable goalies. And I don't really think it was a fit anymore. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, in the case of Daccord, and I guess Riley as well, let bygones be bygones. I think Riley was, for me, the more interesting of the available players, because we're just talking about how we need some. I don't know about if
Capable
depth
enough,
on
right,
the blue
Dean?
line is. Yeah, I don't know if depth on the blue line is the right way to say it anymore, because we do have players who can play on defense. It's more just like an upgrade in quality that we need, and I'm not 100% sure if we can provide that. So it was intriguing, but again, I think that what we need is something. What our defense needs is something that can't be acquired on the waiver wire. We need a legitimate upgrade, and that can only come from getting good, serviceable NHL defense from other teams.
Yeah, I totally agree with Bennett there.
I think the only note I had on Hellberg is I've watched him play in the KHL. I think he's a goalie that really relies on his size. I tweeted about this on our channel, but I really hope he can prove us wrong, give us some solid starts, and keep us up, because the Bergie boys, that's our goaltending tandem right now, and we got to hope that the Bergie boys keep it together.
Love it.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening and watching this week. You can find us on all our social media all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Senstennial or the Senstennial Podcast. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Find us on there, please, on YouTube. Subscribe. We're really close to 200 subscribers, so we'd love to hit that this week. And thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week's episode. And at that point, the Sens may have played 2 or 3 games. So go Sens go, and we'll see you next time.
Go Sens
Go
go.
Sens go.
See you on the other side.